I'm lucky enough that I've put together a theater that I really like. Most of the stuff in this room will probably never change until it dies. So like anybody else, sometimes it's just fun to try something new. We never did this with the intention of being here as long as we have, but you know, life works out the way it is. It's great, you know, it's a nice big, you know, bonus room, but had I known at the time, you know, that we were going to stay in it longer, I would have done a few other things acoustically, maybe put some insulation in the interior walls and stuff, because we have 2 exterior, 2 interior walls, and I didn't do anything to them. Now, the room is acoustically treated for the inside of the room. There is nothing in this room that is trying to prevent noise from getting out or getting in. Luckily, I live in a neighborhood where I'm way off the beating path, so the odds of a car going by or anything are very remote. And the nice thing about having a room where I haven't done double drywall, green glue, staggered studs and things is the acoustic issues of the room are a lot less than the people that do that, because the sound pressure and things in the room has a way to escape through that. Where when you do that, you actually make all the acoustic problems of the room worse than they were before, but you're also making it where the room is more isolated. But again, this room is insanely quiet at any time during the day, that I don't really have to worry about that much. And I've also never really been a thing where I'm like, oh, I have kids in the other room. It's like, well, they'll learn to deal with it, kind of thing like that. So it's just never been a thing. I had lived in a pretty small house before we met, and I had a really small kind of family room style theater. And at that time, I was already writing for, I don't remember which publication at that time, but I was already doing professional reviews. My wife is a professional engineer. So when we started talking about buying a house, we talked about like we really wanted to have a space that, like, if I'm going to be reviewing equipment, it's always been the utmost important to me to be able to try to take the measurement environment out of the measurements. Thinking of it more as almost like an anechoic chamber for whatever I'm doing. Now, obviously you can't make an anechoic chamber, but you also notice that I don't really review speakers, because I've always felt like if you're going to do something, you really want to be able to do that well. But I did do a lot of displays, mainly projectors. And with projectors, I always thought that, again, if I could isolate them as much from the room to make it where I'm measuring that. So the room as a whole, it doesn't have that flashy aesthetic that you see in like home theater magazines, where it's like a lot of wood and it looks like an old, theater style that you would go to a movie theater. It actually has more of a lab grade kind of thing, where, the lighting control in here is literally perfect. If I turn off the lights, you can't see anything in here, even if you sat in here for an hour. There's nothing else contributing light other than the projector itself onto the screen. And then all the acoustic treatments in here, it kind of gives it almost more of like a mixing studio kind of feel, which I actually really like. But all the equipment choices have just been, over the years, looking at, not going for the marketing, looking at sheer performance and things like that. There have been a few iterations, but eventually I would hit a point with certain things where I'm like, the diminishing return scale gets to an nth degree, and I don't feel like there needs to be anything on here. So currently, I have a Stewart screen that's one of their new Evo masking screens. It's using the Studio Tech 130 G4 material, like I said before. That function is mainly because of the size of the screen. My preference for a room like this would still be a Studio Tech 100, just because it is purely like the most, natural screen. Like, it's not doing anything to impart anything on the image. But with the image size that I have, I needed a little bit of gain. And I find that the G4, it's such a tiny amount of any kind of sheen or anything, and it's worked out really great. And it is a full variable masking system with a scope screen. Using the JVC NZ900, I've probably had 15 to 20 different projectors in here over the years. I started that when we built this room, I had a Marantz VP S1, the very first true 1080p DLP. I've had probably 3 or 4 DLPs in here, and I've had some Sonys in here, and I've had a lot of JVCs. I've just found over the years, again, especially with doing the measurements, that for what I'm trying to do. Maximum dynamic range still puts a nice bright picture for the image size that I have and everything. They've just been what I feel like delivers the pinnacle of picture quality for a room like this with a screen this size, and stuff like that. So I've tended to lean toward them, hoping that, you know, eventually other companies would start to catch up, but unfortunately they haven't. I'm using a Panamorph DCR lens, just again to help with light output. I'm a direct dealer for those. I just look at them as a way to increase light and, you know, properly set up minimal, you know, distortion, you know, minimal kind of impact on the image other than just helping you with the brightness. Because again, that headroom can afford you to do more things like increase contrast, increase color gamut, things like that. I'm using a Lumagen video processor for all the video processing in here. Have been using Lumagen products probably for 10 years. For the longest time, Lumagen was the only, you know, game in town. MadVR is now out for the last 3 years. They make a very nice product as well, but I've just never seen a reason, at least in my setup, to move from one to the other. I love the performance of Lumagen, does everything I need it to do. It's been, you know, rock solid in reliability in my system and things like that. For video sources, I have a full Kaleidoscape system. I've been in Kaleidoscape now for a few years. Love the experience of it. Still a pricey product. You and I have actually had conversations about this. I think I've done videos with other people about it. But it's one of those things that once you choke down that pill and you start using it, it's really hard to find a lot of, I mean, I can still nitpick it and stuff, but it's still, to me, the best experience that I've had. And, you know, I've had the Arvolution stuff. I've had the Zapedi stuff where you're doing the server all yourself and stuff. And, you know, I know people say, oh, I'm doing the same thing, but it only takes a little bit and you realize you're really not doing the same thing. And stuff like that. So it is a really nice solution. But I still use discs. I have an Oppo 205 player in here. I have an Arvolution player in here. I have an Apple TV 4K. And then I have 2 gaming systems that I've probably turned on for 2 hours each in the last year because they sounded good, but I never get to use them. So I have a PS5 and I have an Xbox in there. The audio side of the room, I've done very little changes in here for audio. When I first put this room together, I had a really nice Paradigm Signature speaker setup that I really liked. I ended up moving to a legacy audio system for a while. I think Bill Duddleston makes some of the best speakers out there. They're absolutely gorgeous. They sound amazing. Had that for quite a while. Still love his stuff. But eventually ended up moving into what I have now, which I've had for a few years, which is a Revel Ultima system with the Salon 2s, the Voice 2, the gems for the wides, the surrounds, and the rears. And then I'm using some SCL 5s from JBL Synthesis line for my Atmos channels. Every time I've ever heard the Ultimas and stuff in any kind of setting, they just always sounded amazing to me. And I know that from the, you know, from Floyd Toole and Sean over there at Harman, you know, these were the pinnacle of their stuff. It's what they use. Nothing has ever beat them in their blind challenges that they do over there at Harman's headquarters in California and stuff. They appeal to the engineer side of me, like their measurements and everything else. And again, they just sound so amazing. So I had the opportunity to get these a little while back, right before they ceased production. They don't make these anymore. And again, this is a speaker system that until they die, they'll be in the room. For amplification in here, I'm using Emotiva. You know, I don't have any of the fancy Krells and Airs and stuff like that. I'm using the XPR1 monoblocks for my main 3 channels. They only made these for about a year. They weigh like 150 to 200 pounds. It's just like an unlimited amount of power going to each of those speakers, and they've been flawless since I got them. And then I'm using their XPA series for my surrounds. Again, like, they're not a flashy amp, but they deliver. Their measurements stand up to anything out there, so they've been great. And then for my front-end processor, I have the STP75, which is basically a Trinnov Altitude 3216, and that's been great. This whole room, audio-wise, was calibrated by Adam Pels. I don't do Trinnov calibrations. Been trying to get that certification for years and finding the time to go and do it, but until then, you know, I always want to, just like I tell people that getting the right video calibration, I wanted to make sure I got the right audio calibration, and had Adam come out here and do his magic. And, he's fantastic to work with, and he always delivers on that. Outside of that, the room was fully modeled and treated by Acoustic back in the day when they first started up here in the US. I really liked the way their products looked, but they also had full, independent third-party measurements of all of their stuff. I actually, they reached out to me about doing an article for when I was with, I think it was Home Theater Magazine at the time. Their US headquarters was out of Seattle. And so they came out, modeled the room, and we did all the treatments in here. And then I got to know the guy that was the head of the company here in the US. And I was working at the time as an acoustics engineer for the Department of the Navy. And I ended up taking over all of their acoustic programs for Acoustic here in the States. So for a certain amount of time, for quite a few years, anybody that wanted to have their room modeled and things like that, from recording studios to home theaters, I was actually the one that would do all of that, all of the modeling and stuff for them, because Acoustic's out of Portugal, and it was taking too long. So I did that for a while until that guy ended up moving on from the company, and Acoustic USA is now run by somebody else, and they have somebody else doing all that for them. So that was a nice opportunity to kind of see, how these kind of products are integrated. I went to a couple of the architectural shows and stuff to see how architects use them and stuff. So it was nice seeing that side of the industry and the things that do in there. Outside of that, I just ended up putting these in a week ago. These are the Valencia Oslo seats. I really like them. Mike actually referred me to a client for a calibration job, and they had some of these in their room, and I'd been thinking about changing my seats for a while, and I really like the ones in his room, so I picked these up. The back row is just some from Costco on a riser, but outside of that, I think that's it for the equipment in here.
Subs.
Oh, I can't believe it. Yeah, subwoofers. Seaton Sound, Mark Seaton. I've known Mark Seaton since he was with AV123 way back in the day. Probably one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet in this industry. Knows his stuff. You start talking to him, he's an encyclopedia of industry of information with this stuff. And over the years, slowly accumulated stuff. So in the front, I have a pair of his submersives. So dual 15s, and there's two of them up in the front. I have a master slave configuration up there in the front. And then towards the back corners on each side, I have a pair of the F2s, which are, again, dual 15s. They're actually similar to the submersive. They're the same cabinet volume, amplifier, and drivers. They're just in a different configuration, so they have a smaller footprint. Once again, another one of those things where I feel like it's an in-game product. Like, I know there's 21-inch, 35-inch, all these things. These things play down into the single digits just fine. This being a second floor of my house, the tactile effect is amazing. I can't say enough about Mark's subwoofers over the years. Every room I've been in that have them, it's always just amazing. It's just such a great product. So yeah, it'll be another thing that, like, until they die, they'll be in here. So I have been in, I typically in probably more than 100 rooms every year. I've been doing this for 6 years now. So, do the math, that's a lot of rooms. And it is interesting. I thought that was going to be a thing when I started into this. I've been into rooms that are, several $1,000,000. I've been into some of the biggest names in Hollywood's rooms working in there, all the way down to people's just family room systems with a flat panel. I've seen just about everything. Yes, there have been a handful of rooms where I've gone in and I'd be like, this is nice. But most of them have nothing to do with the performance of the room itself. The performance in this room, from video to audio, really never leaves me like really wanting. What I find that I start to want at this point is more of physical limitation. In fact, Mike and I were just talking about this the other day. Like, I'm unfortunately limited to an 8-foot ceiling. Does my Atmos effect and stuff sound great? Absolutely. But I do know that, when I've been in rooms that have similar sizing to my room is, and they have a 10-foot ceiling or a 12-foot ceiling, there's just nothing that can replicate that sense of space. So, yeah, if I could make this room have a 10-foot or even a 12-foot ceiling, I would love that. Outside of that, the dimensions of the room for the amount of people that I typically put in here, you know, sure, you could do a bigger room or something, a bigger screen, so it's more of a theater-like effect, that is cool. But I mean, all of that comes with compromises. As soon as I go to a bigger room and I put a bigger screen in here, that means I have to start looking at projectors that have a lot more light output. But most of those projectors that have more light output don't do other things as well. So the trade-offs start to become more of an issue. So yeah, I think if I could do anything in here, I'd raise my ceiling. But from an actual performance standpoint, when it comes to the audio and the video, yeah, it's just not a thing. And I'm just fortunate enough to say that. Is it the best system I've ever been in? No, but it's gotten to the point now where, it's just nothing ever distracts me. And I feel like the goal of a good home theater is the same goal that you should have, when you go to a really nice movie theater, is that it needs to be good enough that nothing distracts you. That the whole point of this at the end of the day is to enjoy movies and music. That's why I got into this in the first place. And if I'm watching a movie and I can go, movie after movie after movie, and nothing is ever making it where I'm thinking about something that has to do with how it's being displayed, how it's being heard, and I'm just absorbed in the story, that's the goal. And I don't care if that takes you $50,000 to do that, $100,000, $1 million. At the end of the day, most people are throwing money at stuff either to be aesthetic or it's for performance because something's distracting them. And I don't have that problem. And, and adding a hush box and things like that, that just helps that move along that little bit more. Like, oh, okay, well, I guess if I was nitpicking, I could hear this or something like that. So usually the first question I have for people is like, when you're watching something, what about your system ever takes you out of that experience? Again, remember that the goal is to just watch something and not have to do it. Is it because you hear stuff in the house? That wall over there is rattling. The bass doesn't seem like where it should be. The image looks washed out. Put the concentration, instead of like, oh, chasing the names. Oh, I keep on the forum, I keep hearing about this or I keep hearing about that. FOMO in this industry is insane. Instead, focusing on like, well, the projector or whatever you have is already great, but the problem is your room has so much scattered light, so it's just washing out the image. You're not even getting near the potential of what you could get. Have you put the speakers where they need to be? Like where, yeah, you bought all these big subwoofers and you're wondering why you don't have like good extension or whatever else. Well, why are your subs in the places that they are? And I realize, real life has limitations. If it's a family room, you can only put things in certain places. But a lot of times focusing on the environment that it's in and those kind of choices will make a huge difference, more than chasing the next amplifier that's going to change 25 watts that it's like, so what did you do again? Other than a bunch of heavy lifting. Things like that. I feel like trying to make sure that you're making good decisions to maximize the potential of the money that you're spending to again make it where the experience you have in whatever your room is, where the focus is that and taking away the rest of the distraction. I go to the theater all the time. Yeah. I still love the experience of going to a movie theater, seeing it on the big screen, the social of it. It's rare you'll ever find me in a theater by myself unless I'm on a calibration tour and I have some time to kill and I want to go see a movie. But I mean, I've had going to the movies with you a few times. I have a friend group out here that we like going to the movies, and I still love the social sense of it. I like being there opening day for a big movie and experiencing that and stuff like that. That's another time where, if I'm going to spend money to go to a movie theater, 99% of the time I'm going to a Dolby Cinema, an IMAX theater. We're lucky enough here in Seattle, we have the Cinerama there in downtown. We have some really nice theaters out here. And I always do play the game of like, would this be better in my theater or not? And most of the time I feel it would be, other than just the sheer size of it. I never thought in a million years when I started into this hobby, in my early 20s that I would ever be anywhere near this. So I think that we are starting to have a generation that's the up and comers, the 30 somethings, the 20 somethings that didn't have the same experience that I had with home theater. When I was in my 20s and getting in my early 20s, really getting into home theater, here we're in Seattle. I could go to downtown Seattle, go into Roosevelt Avenue, and there were 8 or 9 really nice high-end home theater stores where each of those had 3 to 5 showroom quality demo rooms where you went in there and you were like, holy crap, like this would be amazing to have. It's like the road and track and motor trends that have a Bugatti and a Lamborghini on the front cover. Less than 1% of those readers are buying those cars. But that's, if you're into cars, like that's what you want to hear about. You don't care about the Prius. It's a fine car and stuff. It's, you know what I mean? But like if you're an enthusiast, like what gets you excited, and stuff like that. And that's what I think is gone. Like if I went right now and we just wanted to go and find a place to like be like kind of blown away, there isn't any. There's Best Buy, and it's like, and it's a wall of screens. So the generations coming up now in their 20s and 30s that are the people that are going to want to put a home theater in there, they don't even know what that is, unless they happen to go to somebody like me or Mike or you that has a theater and they're like, oh crap, I didn't know you could do this. I have so many people come in like, I didn't know you could do this in a room. Where when I was getting into this hobby, 30 years ago, there was tons of examples of this, and stuff like that. Now, I think forums help with that, but you have to know that it exists before you get into it and stuff. Now, in terms of like, like what is home theater today compared to 20 years ago? Oh my God, like the quality of the video, the average quality of video from a streaming service is so far beyond what it was when I started into this. The need for so many different pieces of equipment are not there anymore. When I started in, everything was interlaced and scaling and, the quality. You needed all these tricks to make it look good, where now the raw video, the raw audio, you're uncompressed, multi-channel, all this stuff like that. And that's just the norm, so if you are getting into this thing, the ability to have a really good looking display. When I was in my 20s, CRT projectors were really expensive, so a lot of people had rear projection TVs and, like a big one was 65 inches, but it was in a hutch that was the size of it was insane. Where now a 65-inch, OLED or a really nice flat panel display is like pennies on the dollar compared to that. And the picture quality you get from that is so far and beyond. So I think that as a hobby, if you love movies, you love watching this kind of stuff and you want that, your opportunities to have just an absolutely amazing experience at such a low entry cost point. I mean, yes, this is like a, way above that. But again, like this is beyond anything that I thought that I would have in my 20s, and I was loving what I had at the time. So you can have a really fun, exciting experience for such a low amount of money that's way beyond anything I would have dreamed of at that time. So I think what it offers is better than it's ever been. The problem is that, with the internet marketplace and everything else, it's so hard for any business that wants to give you that experience to get you excited about it to exist, because we've entered into a society now where those are just used as window dressing and window shopping. You go in there, you take advantage of a service that somebody's paying a lot of money to give you, and then you go like, I want this and I want that, and then you go online and you find somebody that's going to give you that for a bottom dollar. And I get it. I want to save money as much as the next guy, but that comes at a cost. There's a reason why not even home theater, you go in any town, almost all of the shopping that you want to do, it's barely there anymore. There aren't really small businesses because you can just get it off Amazon. And if they do have it, you're walking in there and looking at it, and then you're looking at your phone at what you can get it from an Amazon, and then you're wondering why the next week they're gone. So it's one of those things that as a society, I feel like if you want these things, you have to realize the pros and cons of the decisions you make. Home theater is dying in that respect, that the ability for people to realize it exists and what is capable is pretty much gone. You see it in trade shows, you see it in everything else. So unless somebody wants to put on special events and try to get people in the neighborhood to do it, or they want to put the money up to do that. And I encourage anybody that lives in an area that has a dealer like that, if you love this hobby and stuff like that, spend a little bit of extra money, keep it alive, because, you want other people in the industry, in your area to get into it, because then maybe you can have like a local home theater group. You meet other people. You could do that through things like that. And local dealers should think about that, like doing demo things where you bring in people from the community so that they, meet each other, but that brings more people, and you get that symbiotic relationship going on. But that's why I think home theater is dying, is that people just don't know it exists unless you're in it. And, that number is going to keep dwindling because there isn't a way for people to experience the first time. Again, you and I are older, so again, we came up when this was more of a thing. I think the ability to do a room like this doesn't cost as much as it used to, as you said, to get a certain level of performance that you wouldn't have been able to achieve at the same price point. It's still expensive, but even this is probably overkill for most people and things like this, but I work in this industry, I kind of have to have that. But at the same time, again, if people aren't, unless you're already in the hobby and worked your way up, I just don't think the gateway is there as easy for people that want to find out, to just randomly walk into it and stuff like that. They think about things more of like, oh yeah, you get a sound bar, or yeah, like I'm gonna go to Costco because they have 98-inch TVs now. And that's fantastic. Nothing wrong with that at all. I love that those opportunities are there, but that's what they think of home theater. I've had people that don't know what home theater is come to my house, and then they hear that, like, oh, I heard you're really into home theater. They want to come over and watch a movie, and they go to my family room, they see a big OLED and a sound bar, and they think that's the home theater. They're like, oh yeah, well, that's a bigger TV than I've got and stuff, but they don't. I'm like, this is just the family room, kind of thing like that. And that is a nice system, but then they come in here and they're like, oh my God, like, and again, like, they didn't comprehend that this is something that's even like a thing.